Rimuru, the hero copycat by RimuruEdward6. Hawks Pav. Rimuru let out a small sigh, leaning back on the couch again. Her earlier flustered state had mostly faded, but she still seemed cautious as she glanced my way. Well, she started, her tone somewhere between resigned and teasing, I guess you won't let me search for a different sleeping place tonight. She paused, raising an eyebrow. Or do I have to? I smirked, crossing my arms. Not a chance. You're staying right here, where I can keep an eye on you. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly, though there was no real bite to her glare. You're not my babysitter, Hawks. No, I'm not, I agreed, leaning forward with a grin. But you did just confess to idolizing me, so I'd say that puts me in charge for the night. She groaned, covering her face with her hands. Why'd I even talk to you? Because I'm awesome, I said without missing a beat. Her groan turned into a quiet laugh, and when she lowered her hands, there was a faint smile tugging at her lips. Fine, she muttered, rolling her eyes. But only because I'm too tired to argue. Good, I said, standing up and grabbing an extra pillow from a nearby chair. I tossed it onto the couch beside her. Get comfortable. You're not going anywhere tonight. She picked up the pillow, shaking her head but not protesting further. You're impossible, Hawks. Yeah, I said with a shrug. But you're still here, so I must be doing something right. She didn't respond, instead curling up on the couch and pulling the blanket tighter around her. Thanks, she said softly after a moment, her voice barely audible. I smiled, sitting back down in my chair. Anytime, Rimuru. Now get some sleep. She didn't need to be told twice. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, and the tension that always seemed to follow her finally eased. And as I sat there, watching over her, I couldn't help but feel like this was exactly where she needed to be. The stillness of the room was broken by a faint murmur. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then Rimuru shifted under the blanket, her face scrunching up as if she was fighting something in her sleep. I can't let myself be attached to anyone, she mumbled, her voice strained and trembling. It would make it harder, when I have to leave. I stiffened, her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. She shifted again, clutching the blanket tightly as she continued, her voice quieter but filled with pain. No. I don't want to sleep in a tree or bush again. The words hung heavy in the air, and I felt a wave of anger and sorrow wash over me. What kind of life had she been living before? Sleeping in trees, bushes. And even now, in the safety of my place, she was so consumed by the fear of losing connections that it haunted her dreams. I stood and walked over to her, crouching beside the couch. Rimuru, I said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Hey, it's okay. You're safe here. She flinched slightly, her golden eyes snapping open, wide and unfocused for a moment. Then she blinked, recognition settling in as her breathing slowed. Hawks, she muttered, her voice thick with exhaustion. You were having a nightmare, I said gently, keeping my hand on her shoulder. Wanna talk about it? She shook her head, looking away as she clutched the blanket tighter. It's nothing. Just old stuff. Old stuff doesn't just go away, I said, my tone soft but firm. It sticks with you until you deal with it. You don't have to tell me everything, but I'm here if you want to talk. For a moment, she didn't say anything, her gaze fixed on the edge of the couch. Then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. I used to move around a lot, she admitted quietly. I didn't always have a place to stay, so I made do. I clenched my fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I kept my tone steady. Made do how? Her lips twitched into a faint, bitter smile. Trees, bushes, abandoned buildings, whatever worked. I sat back slightly, my chest tightening at her words. Rimuru. It's not a big deal, she said quickly, brushing it off like it didn't matter. It's just how it was. It is a big deal, I said firmly. You shouldn't have had to live like that. And you don't have to live like that anymore. She looked at me then, her golden eyes guarded but vulnerable. It's hard to believe that sometimes, she admitted softly. I'm used to being on my own. Well, get used to something else, I said with a small smile. Because you're not on your own anymore. Not while I'm around. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, she looked like she might argue. But then she sighed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Thanks, Hawks, she said quietly, her voice sincere. Anytime, I replied, standing up. Now get some rest. You're not sleeping in a tree or a bush tonight, or ever again if I can help it. She let out a soft laugh, her expression lighter than before. You're impossible. Maybe, I said with a grin. But I'm also your hero, remember? She rolled her eyes, but the smile stayed as she settled back into the couch, pulling the blanket around her. And as I sat back in my chair, watching her drift off to sleep again, I silently vowed to make sure she never had to feel that kind of loneliness again. I sat back in my chair, arms crossed as I watched Rimuru's sleeping form. She seemed calmer now, the tension from her nightmare slowly fading as her breathing evened out again. But her words from earlier still echoed in my head. Sleeping in trees and bushes. Keeping herself detached from people so it wouldn't hurt when she had to leave. This was more than just her carrying a heavy burden, this was survival, plain and simple. And while I like to think I was good at handling tough situations, this felt a little out of my depth. I ran a hand through my hair, letting out a slow sigh. This is above my pay grade, I muttered to myself. Rimuru was tough, probably tougher than most heroes I'd worked with, but even she had limits. And the more I learned about what she'd been through, the clearer it became that she needed more than just my support. I glanced at my phone, the thought forming before I could second guess it. All Might. He had more experience, more wisdom, and, let's face it, more patience. If anyone could help me figure out how to handle this, it was him. I picked up my phone and sent him a quick text. Got a situation with Rimuru. Need your input. Can we meet tomorrow? The reply came almost instantly. Of course, Hawks. I'll make time. What's going on? I glanced at Rimuru, still fast asleep, before typing back. It's complicated. I'll explain everything in person. The response was immediate. Understood. Let's meet at the usual place. We'll figure it out together. I set the phone down, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Okay, I murmured, leaning back in my chair. Step 1. Don't mess this up. Rimuru stirred slightly, but she didn't wake. Her expression was peaceful now, and for a moment, I felt a small sense of relief. I might not have all the answers, but I wasn't going to let her face this alone. And with All Might's help, I'd make sure we found a way to give her the support she needed. Hang in there, Rimuru, I said softly. We've got your back. With those words I fell asleep. Hawk's Pav. The smell hit me before I even opened my eyes, something rich, savory, and undeniably delicious. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, but as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and sat up, the scent grew stronger. I followed it into the kitchen, still half asleep, and stopped in my tracks. There was Rimuru, standing at the stove, a spatula in one hand and a plate in the other. The counter was covered in an impressive spread, perfectly cooked eggs, golden brown pancakes, crispy bacon, and even a small bowl of fruit that looked like it belonged in a fancy cafe. Morning, she said casually, not even glancing back as she flipped a pancake with practiced ease. I blinked, still trying to process what I was seeing. Rimuru, I started, stepping into the kitchen, did you make all this? She glanced over her shoulder, raising an eyebrow. Who else would have made it? I let out a low whistle, eyeing the spread. This looks amazing. Where did you learn to cook like this? She shrugged, turning back to the stove. When you don't have much, you learn to make the most of what you've got. Cooking just became one of those things I got good at. I walked closer, still marveling at the food. Well, you're more than good at it. This could rival any restaurant. Her lips quirked into a small smile, but she didn't say anything, instead focusing on plating the last pancake. All right, she said, setting the plate on the counter. Dig in before it gets cold. I grabbed a plate and started loading it up, still half in awe. You didn't have to do this, you know, I said, glancing at her. She shrugged again, sitting down with her own plate. I owed you for letting me stay. Consider it my way of saying thanks. I grinned, taking a bite of the eggs. They were perfect, fluffy and seasoned just right. Well, consider the debt paid in full, I said, my voice muffled by food. This is incredible. She chuckled softly, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks. It's just breakfast. Not just breakfast, I corrected, gesturing to the spread. This is a feast. If hero work doesn't pan out, you could open a restaurant. She rolled her eyes but didn't argue, instead focusing on her food. As we ate, the tension from the past few days seemed to fade, replaced by an easy, comfortable silence. For once, it felt like things were normal, like we weren't carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. And honestly, it was nice. Thanks, Rimuru, I said after a while, my tone more sincere. This means a lot. She glanced at me, her golden eyes softening. You're welcome, Hawks. And in that moment, I realized just how much she'd been holding back. She might not always show it, but Rimuru cared, deeply. And this breakfast. It was just one more way she let that show. After breakfast, Rimuru stood from the table and stretched, her usual guarded demeanor replaced by something more relaxed. All right, she said casually, stepping back toward the kitchen. Then, without warning, she performed a series of intricate hand signs, and I watched in disbelief as the plates and utensils started cleaning themselves. What the? I began, blinking as the dishes floated, scrubbed themselves, and neatly returned to their places in the cabinets. She glanced at me over her shoulder, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. What? Never seen a little alchemical cleanup before. I stared at her, still processing what I'd just seen. You're full of surprises, Rimuru. Part of my charm, she replied with a grin, grabbing her bag and slinging it over her shoulder. Anyway, I'm heading to school. I'll see you after work hours tonight. Before I could respond, she waved and bolted out the door, her silver hair catching the sunlight as she ran off. I chuckled to myself, shaking my head. She really is something else. But her words from the previous night still lingered in the back of my mind. The nightmare, the confession about her quirk, the fear of becoming like All for One, it was a lot to unpack. And as much as I wanted to help her, I knew I couldn't do it alone. With that thought, I grabbed my phone and keys, heading out to my meeting with All Might. The usual meeting spot was a quiet cafe tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the city. All Might was already there when I arrived, seated at a table in the corner, his large frame making the chair look comically small. Hawks, he greeted warmly, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for meeting me. Thanks for making time, I replied, taking a seat across from him. I've got a lot to talk about, and I need your input. His expression shifted, concern replacing his usual cheerful demeanor. Is this about Rimuru? I nodded, leaning forward. Yeah, she's been through more than I think even she realizes. And last night, I learned things that, well, let's just say it's complicated. All Might's brow furrowed as he folded his hands on the table. Tell me everything. And so I did, recounting everything from her nightmare to her confessions about her quirk in her past. When I finished, All Might was quiet for a moment, his thoughtful gaze fixed on the table. You were right to come to me, he said finally, his tone serious. Rimuru is carrying a heavy burden, one no child should have to bear. But she's not alone anymore, Hawks. And with our support, I believe she can overcome it. I nodded, his words reassuring but not enough to ease the knot in my chest. She's tough, no question about that. But I'm worried about how much more she can take before it's too much. All Might's gaze softened. We'll make sure she doesn't have to carry this weight alone. Together, we can help her find her strength, and remind her that she doesn't have to fight this battle by herself. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. All for one Pav. Her voice returned, as it always did, smooth, mocking, and laced with that insufferable confidence that made my blood boil. Father, she began, her tone light and teasing, it's so good to speak with you again. I see you've been busy, getting things ready for your operation again. Good for you. I clenched my fists, already bracing for her next move. But you know what's even better, Father. She continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge. I've taken away your truth card. I froze, my mind racing as her words sank in. You always held onto that, didn't you? She said, almost pityingly. The idea that you could expose me, ruin everything I've built with the truth about who I am. But now, I've used the truth card myself. I leaned forward, my expression darkening. What have you done, Rimuru? Her laughter echoed in my mind, soft and infuriating. Oh, Father, it's simple. I've made myself the gullible child hero. The one with the tragic backstory, the shitty father, and the bright, hopeful future. Hawks saved me from you, didn't you hear? I slammed my fist down on the desk, my voice low and venomous. You're twisting the narrative. Of course I am, she replied smoothly. I've taken the truth and turned it into a weapon. A weapon against you. Now, I've got the whole, super OP, card on the table. My quirk's been revealed, its limits stretched, its potential acknowledged, but nobody really cares. Her words stung, not because they were lies, but because they were the perfect manipulation of reality. She'd weaponized her story in a way that made my greatest leverage utterly useless. They don't see me as a threat, she continued, her tone almost gleeful. They see me as a hero, a symbol of hope, of resilience. The kid who escaped her villainous father to become something better. Even if you told them the truth, father, they'd only see you as the monster I overcame. I sat back, my mind racing to find a counter to her strategy, but every angle led to the same conclusion: she'd outmaneuvered me. You've made yourself untouchable, I said finally, my voice cold. Not untouchable, she corrected, her tone soft but firm. Just prepared. And now, father, the board is mine. Your move. Her presence faded, leaving me alone with her parting words. I leaned back in my chair, my mind a storm of frustration and reluctant admiration. She'd taken my greatest weapon against her and turned it into her shield. But no shield was impenetrable. You've outplayed me this time, Rimuru, I murmured, a slow smile spreading across my face. But every game has a final move. And when the time comes, I'll make sure mine is one you never see coming. I sat alone in the dim light of my chamber, the silence broken only by the faint hum of machinery around me. Rimuru's voice still echoed in my mind, her mockery and triumph ringing louder than I wanted to admit. She had turned the truth against me, flipped the narrative to make herself untouchable. It was a masterstroke, I would concede that much. But every move, no matter how brilliant, left a trail of vulnerabilities. I leaned forward, steepling my fingers as my mind began to churn. She's made herself the tragic hero, I murmured, my voice cold and deliberate. A story so compelling, even the truth becomes irrelevant. Clever girl. But stories, no matter how well crafted, were still bound by reality. In Rimuru's reality, her very existence was built on a quirk that mirrored my own. That was my advantage. No matter how far she runs, I muttered, a slow smile spreading across my face, she cannot escape the roots of her power. She's connected to me in ways even she cannot fully sever. The first step was clear: gather information. If Rimuru's quirk truly had no limits, then I needed to understand its full capabilities, not just the lies she'd fed to the world, but the truth she kept hidden even from herself. I pressed a button on the console before me, summoning one of my most loyal operatives. The door hissed open, and a shadowed figure stepped inside, bowing low. My lord. Begin surveillance on Rimuru, I commanded, my tone sharp. I want everything: her movements, her connections, her strategies. Leave no detail unchecked. The figure nodded, disappearing as quickly as they had come. I turned back to the console, pulling up files on every encounter Rimuru had with heroes, villains, and anyone in between. Patterns would emerge, they always did, and when they did, I would strike. She may have shielded herself with a carefully crafted story, I mused aloud, but even shields crack under the right pressure. And then there was Hawks. The fool had taken her in, believed her lies, and allowed her access to the inner workings of the hero world. He was a liability, one I could exploit. If Hawks trusts her completely, I murmured, then he's already compromised. But trust can be a dangerous thing. All it takes is one planted seed of doubt. I leaned back, a slow, sinister smile spreading across my face as my plan began to take shape. Rimuru, I said softly, as if speaking directly to her. You've outmaneuvered me for now. But the game isn't over. And the more you build your castle of lies, the higher it will fall when I strike. The pieces were already moving, and I would ensure that when the time came, the board was mine to control. I just had to outplay my own created opponent. All for one POV. I had just finished finalizing the next phase of my plan when her voice echoed in my mind once again, smooth and laced with that infuriating confidence. Father, she began, her tone almost playful, you know I'm always surveying you, right? Audio, video, the whole package. I froze, my mind racing. She was bluffing. She had to be. No one could penetrate the layers of security surrounding me, let alone monitor me without my knowledge. But then her voice continued, sharper now, and entirely too self-assured. You really should have upgraded your systems, father. I mean, they're impressive, don't get me wrong, but they're not exactly Rimuru-proof. I clenched my fists, my expression darkening as her laughter echoed faintly in the background. How long have you been watching? I demanded aloud, my voice cold and low. Oh, long enough, she replied, her voice tinged with amusement. Let's just say I know all about your little plans, Hawks, the surveillance on me, even your attempt to understand my quirk. It's cute, really. My teeth ground together as I stood, my mind already working to find the flaw in her statement. If she was monitoring me, there would have been signs, interruptions in my systems, anomalies in the data flow. Unless you've been using your quirk, I said slowly, the realization dawning on me. You've been bypassing my systems entirely, haven't you? Bingo, she said cheerfully. See, you're catching on. I don't need to break into your tech when I can just observe directly. Her audacity was infuriating, but beneath the anger, I felt a grudging respect. She was playing a dangerous game, but she was playing it well. This changes nothing, I said firmly, my voice steady. You may think you're in control, Rimuru, but every move you make reveals more of yourself to me. Maybe, she admitted, her tone softening slightly. But it also means I know every move you're making, father. And that gives me the advantage. Her presence faded then, leaving me alone with the weight of her words. I sat back in my chair, my fists still clenched as I replayed the conversation in my mind. She's watching, I murmured to myself, my voice low. Every step, every plan, she's always one step ahead. But even as the frustration bubbled beneath the surface, I couldn't help but smile. You may have the advantage now, Rimuru, I said softly. But even the watchful eye has its blind spots. And when I find yours, this game will finally end. She thought she'd outsmarted me, but the truth was simple. No one, not even her, could anticipate everything. And I would prove it. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. Every time she had responded to me, every taunt, every mockery, it was always too perfect. Her words weren't just timely, they were tailored, as if she knew exactly what I was thinking before I said it. She's been doing this for a while, I murmured, the realization hitting me like a bolt of lightning. Her telepathy wasn't just a tool for communication. She had been using it to listen, to anticipate my every move. From the very first time I'd spoken with her telepathically, she had always seemed one step ahead, as though she was plucking the answers straight from my mind. Of course, I said, the pieces clicking together. That's how she always has the perfect response. That's how she knows everything. It wasn't just surveillance cameras and audio recordings, those were distractions, ways to throw me off. Her real method of gathering intel was far more insidious. She had been monitoring my thoughts. And not just mine. That explains the intel she gives her allies, I muttered, my voice cold and measured. Every detail, every strategy, it's all because she's been listening. She doesn't need spies or technology when she can pull the answers directly from the source. I stood, pacing the room as the weight of the revelation settled over me. She's been playing me from the start, I said, my fists clenching at my sides. Not just observing, but actively manipulating the board with information she shouldn't even have. A bitter laugh escaped me, though it held no humor. Of course, Rimuru. Why fight fair when you can tilt the game in your favor? But even as the anger simmered beneath the surface, a new resolve began to take shape. Telepathy, I murmured, my voice soft but filled with determination. It's a powerful tool, but it's not infallible. She may have been reading my thoughts, but thoughts can be controlled. Misled. A slow, calculating smile spread across my face as a new plan began to form. You've been playing this game well, Rimuru, I said aloud, my voice steady. But now it's my turn to rewrite the rules. She thought she knew everything, thought she could stay ahead of me by listening to my every thought. But telepathy, like any other ability, was vulnerable to misdirection. And if she wanted to play this game with me, I would give her a show she'd never forget. As if on cue, her voice returned, cutting through the silence with that same infuriating calm. I look forward to seeing what you can bring to the table, father, she said, her tone laced with amusement. After all, it wouldn't be fun if you didn't try. I stopped pacing, her words confirming what I already suspected. She had been listening, pulling my thoughts apart and using them to her advantage. You're confident, I said aloud, my voice steady. But confidence is a dangerous thing, Rimuru. Oh, I know, she replied, her voice almost playful. But so far, it's served me well. Don't you think? Her laughter echoed faintly in my mind, a sound that made my fists clench. You've built a house of cards, my dear, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. And when it falls, the crash will be spectacular. Maybe, she admitted, her tone softening slightly. But you'd better make it a good move, father. I'm not going to wait forever. And with that, her presence faded once more, leaving me alone in the silence of my chamber. I stood still for a moment, letting her words sink in. She was taunting me, daring me to make my move. But she was also underestimating me. Very well, Rimuru, I murmured, a sinister smile tugging at my lips. If it's a game you want, then a game you shall have. I returned to my desk, my mind racing with possibilities. Telepathy might give her the edge for now, but she was still limited by one thing, her own assumptions. She believed she had control, believed she could anticipate my every move. But belief was not the same as certainty. You've been watching, listening, playing your little games, I said softly, leaning back in my chair. But now it's my turn to set the stage. If Rimuru wanted to see what I could bring to the table, then I would show her, on my terms. The game had only just begun. Her voice returned yet again, weaving itself into my thoughts with maddening precision. Father, she began, her tone filled with that infuriating mix of confidence and amusement, is this not fun? Even you have to admit, you haven't smiled this much in years. I froze, the faint tug of a smirk on my lips betraying her words. Damn her. I am truly your daughter, she continued, her voice softening, yet no less pointed. I have followers who would do anything for me. They fight for my case, believing in me completely. I've mastered manipulation, charisma, and power. She paused, her next words cutting like a blade. And my mastery is equal to yours, father. In power, in strategy, in control. You taught me well, whether you meant or not. I clenched my fists, her taunts digging deeper than I wanted to admit. She was right, of course. She was my equal, perhaps even my better in certain ways. She wielded the tools I had perfected over decades and added her own spin, her own brilliance. Enjoy this while you can, Rimuru, I said aloud, my voice cold but steady. Because even the best games must come to an end. Oh, I know, father, she replied smoothly. But until then, let's enjoy ourselves, shall we? After all, it's not every day you meet your match. Her laughter faded, leaving me alone with her words and the unsettling truth they carried. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. She was a reflection of me in many ways, manipulative, charismatic, and frighteningly powerful. But there was one key difference. She was playing for something greater than herself. And that, I realized, was her most dangerous weapon. You've learned well, Rimuru, I murmured, a faint smile tugging at my lips. But even you haven't learned everything. This game of ours wasn't just a battle of strength or wits, it was a war of ideals. And I wasn't done fighting yet.